Worldwide, fertility rates are in decline. And if you ask me, I believe this is one of the most imminent and serious threats humans face today. Our guest today contends that nurturing a fully functional reproductive system alongside meticulous aesthetic care forms the cornerstone of an extended lifespan. He's the scientific director and founder of Austin Biotec, a company that's dedicated to challenging the aging process and extending life. This is the story of Freudenspanne with Zack Varkaris. Zack, so good to see you again, man.
Hi, how are you, Casper? Good, thank you. Thank you.
We met in Miami at the Biohacking Expo, and I loved what you were presenting there and this concept of Freudenspanne, which, as we were joking before, I'm trying to say with a European type of dialect here and get into my Polish roots of saying instead of Freudenspanne, or something.
I think American would be Freudenspanne.
Freud in
Freudenspanne.
Spain. Yeah,
Yeah.
Freud in Spain. Now we just lost viewers there who we
Sorry.
insulted. No, but listen, break it down for me because I really love this idea and this concept, and you're even writing a whole book about it. So, what is Freudenspanne?
Okay, great. Thanks. Well, just I'll take a step back. Freudenspanne is. I'll give you the definition, then take a step back from
Sure.
that about where it came from. So, Freudenspanne is defined as the quantitative effects emotions have on the biomarkers of aging. And in simplistic terms, that sounds very technical, but fundamentally, why do people die of a broken heart, or
Hmm.
do they die of a broken heart? And why do people's hairs turn white overnight? Why is it when you feel great you look younger? How many times have you had a couple of drinks and you're feeling great, and someone says you look fantastic? You're like, I haven't slept all night, I've been drinking all night, but you look great. Why is that? Right? Obviously, it's not sustainable, but that area, there is a reason, and that is the thing that we looked at, and our background as biologists and the team that created this. So I am the founder of Austin Biotech. But I'm the co-founder. There's another founder, Deborah Phillips, as well, who's a college roommate of mine, college friend of mine as well. And we've got some interesting stories together that we've done. But
Hmm.
we there's a whole team of us behind this. And what it is that when we're looking at procedures about keeping people healthy and well, we discovered about emotions. And a lot of health and wellness is very male driven. It's very tech bro driven. How big your muscles are, how many inches you've got, yada yada. And it's like, well, there's two halves to the spectrum. There's men and women. I know that's sort of, a very old-fashioned way of saying things, but they are two halves of the circle, and they do have their individual strengths and weaknesses, and they complement each other. They're not equal. They're complementary, and so we've looked at it from a far more female-driven perspective, which I can tell you, I thought I was in touch with my feminine side until I actually delved into this. I don't know anything, nothing at all.
You
I
were
really
quickly corrected.
quickly, I was quickly brought that chopped down at the knees. I tell you, but it's so that's basically where it came from, and it stemmed for Freudenspanne. And when we were looking at extending lifespans and health spans, and we obviously decided that this is no emotions involved in it, because again, that we have a saying in Greek: if I don't drink or smoke, I will live to be 100. I'm not going to I'm going to do the translation, but even if I don't, it will feel like it. Now, I'm not saying that drinking and smoking is a good thing, but it's that relaxation. And when you
Hmm.
look at things like the blue zone diets and the blue zone areas, which we were talking about, and being a Greek, albeit with an English accent, but a Greek uh, from Crete and from the Ikaria area as well, is that when you look at the long livers around the world, they have three things in common. The first thing is regular moderate exercise. The
Hmm.
second thing is social networks. And they have the idea now. It's a double-edged sword living in the village. They all know your business, but also it means that when you're in trouble, you've got support.
Yes.
And as we age, our ability to resist trauma is the wrong word. Resist change
Yeah.
can be diminished. If you don't use it, you lose it. And then the third thing is believing in something greater than yourself, whether it's God, Jesus, Buddha, whatever it is, Gaia, Yahweh, I don't know. But all of those things. It's something greater. We're not top of the tree. Those are the three things that are common amongst all the long living communities of the blue zones. So let's look at those 3 points. Okay, regular moderate exercise, that's standard, stay fit. Believing in God and believing in social networks, that's not a physical thing. Mm-hmm. That's not a mental thing. That's maybe spiritual, but it's definitely emotional. I mean, there's nothing worse than being betrayed by someone close to you, right? Think about it. I'm sure we've all had betrayals by friends or family. And when you have that betrayal, depending on what level it is, it's really painful because it's that person that you trust. It's like, in The Godfather, when Fredo, takes out Michael, he's like, what have you done? My brother, and so that's the thing. And that can affect you. And that aged him. That made him an evil man, that made him become something that he should never have done. And he was racked by guilt. And in the end, he paid the price. That's a classic story arc. And so therefore, that's where Freudenspanne comes from. But to take a step back from that is what we created. I mean, would you like me to talk about Freudenspanne, or would you like me to talk about the backside of it first, of how we came about it?
Whichever you prefer.
Okay, all right. Okay, I'm giving you choice. That's dangerous. So yeah, I know. Choice
Go
ain't
wild.
Good. Go wild, yeah. Okay, so the thing is that when we looked at fertility rates, you're very right. Fertility rates are dropping in this world. Now, there's one school of thought that says, oh, the world is overpopulated, we're a plague. And by a lot of the metrics that you look at in biological terms, that is sort of true. But by the other metric is that we can sustain a lot more people. So there's a very interesting stat. In 2007, we reached what's called the peak agriculture. So it takes 1.7 acres or 1.7 hectares, I can never remember now, but to feed a human being. Yeah. And as of 2007, there was too many people on the planet for the amount of farmland that existed. Mm-hmm. Now, there are people looking at ways of sustaining food production, but actually, we have enough food to produce to feed a population planet of 8-9 billion. It's not that much of a problem. And we can also go to things like, protein based from the lab meat and yada, yada, and so on and so forth. But what's very interesting is we hit that peak point in 2007. We're now 14 years after that point. Population still growing, we have no issue with food. I think there's a very interesting stat about there's 2 billion people that are obese and there's 1.7 billion. 1.7 billion,
right? Yeah, I saw that recently.
But 1.7 billion people are still in starvation. Well, wait a minute. Yes. How does that work?
Right.
Can we even it out?
Can we balance that out?
Yeah. So when we look at that, we said, okay, the issue is with fertility is that fertility rates are dropping. Now, they're dropping for 3 reasons. The first reason is women have more rights and more choice in education. I'm all for that. It's all great. I'm brought up by a family of educated, strong Greek women. Believe you me, I'm used to it. It's not a problem. The second thing is the cost of children. Back in the good old days, when, kids were like 8 years old, you stuck them out in the fields and they made you money. Now, they're a sinkhole till they're 25 because they're at college and you've got to do this and you've got to do that, right? And you still have them on your health insurance till you're 25, right? So that says a lot, which ironically is the time that you actually physically stop growing, which is an interesting age. And this is something we can talk about maturity coming later on. The third thing, though, that's not talked about and is the most dangerous thing of them all is actual fertility rates in men and women is actually dropping significantly. So you and I, on average, I'm not saying you are this person, but just take statistical average, are firing 50% less live ammunition than our grandfathers were 50 years ago. 50%. Now, that's still a lot of bullets, but that fact of sperm motility is decreasing. You have deformity of sperm, you have increased levels of autism because of the children, and so on and so forth. And it's not that we're having children a lot later in life. And this is a very interesting stat with men, which is that when do you think men, I'll give you a question. When do you think men are at their most fertile?
Ooh, I feel like you gave me this question when we met. I was shocked out then. I remember stating I thought it was actually in the 30s or so, but I'm now recalling it was later than that.
No, that was the question I was asking you about strength,
Oh,
30s and
okay.
50. Yeah, yeah. It's actually in your mid 40s, 44, 42 to 44.
Mm,
Now, I find that a very strange statistic because I thought to myself, well, what about the drinking and then lifestyle
right.
choices? But I don't know why that is. I still don't have the answer for that. But with women, their peak fertility is between 20 to 30, right?
Hmm.
Or 22 to 30, I think it is, or 22 to 29. It's something in that area.
Yeah.
So there is this issues that women are also having issues with something called PCOS,
Yes.
polycystic ovarian syndrome,
Hmm.
and POF, premature ovarian failure, and
Hmm.
also mosaic style illnesses, which are spontaneous illnesses that occur that we regard as genetic, but are not genetic. They're an epigenetic expression, and they revolve around fertility. Now, there are many, many, many reasons for why this could be the case. But one of the interesting points about this, about fertility, is that having the ability to have children helps you live longer, especially with women. So the a very interesting statistic. Again, I'm giving you some statistic moments at the moment, but the average age for an American female to go through menopause is around 51, depending on rate. It's race dependent. So if you're from Southeast Asia, it tends to be slightly younger. If you're from the Mediterranean countries and what I call the latitude countries, so Japan, North Korea, Northern China, Georgia in Asia, and in Europe, sorry, in part of the former Russia, former Soviet Union, Greece,
Hmm.
Italy, Spain, those people that live on that latitude tend to have much later menopause rate at around about 52. But on average, it's about 50, 51 years old across the board. If you go through menopause at 56, 5 years later, you will live an extra 11 years of life or 13% more life. That's a huge amount.
Huge.
But why? What's the benefit? There's only five species that go through menopause. The other four, by the way, are all marine mammals, whales or
Hmm.
dolphins, and narwhals. Narwhals are whales. Killer whales, which are dolphins, and porpoises. Why do humans do it? No primates do, no monkeys do, none of that
Hmm.
stuff. Um, Again, that's a story totally in on itself, and you would have to do another hour just to discuss that. So let's not go into it. We'll just accept it as fact. But the fact is that if you can delay it, a woman lives longer. Now, the reason is, think about it. What makes us a man or a woman? We start off as little babies and we got little, little blobs of fat with 30% fat, with little bits are slightly different. And we differentiate. And men, we get deep voices, muscles, chest hair, etc. Balls drop, bang. And so the idea is we go and grab what we want and we can use physical violence. And interestingly, we have much more smaller frontal lobes than women until we have children, which is very interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah. The second thing is that women, they develop hips, breasts, hair, so on and so forth. And that way they can, and the idea is we spread our genetics between each other, meiotic reproduction, sexual reproduction. So the things that we classify as attractive are all related to sexual reproduction. Now, you might prefer blondes or brunettes or tall or short or, whatever, but we all agree what's healthy. We all agree that's healthy. You look at someone and they don't look right. Ooh, they just look a bit weird. And if you're discussing whether you like this person or not, you're discussing minutiae, and that's preferences of what you find attractive. But it's all very similar things, right? So the things that make us healthy are our sexual functions, our endocrine system, right? So would it not make sense that rather than trying to, as you age, prop up your breasts or give yourself less brain fog or thicken your hair with some finasteride, would it not make more sense to actually keep your body in that loop of being sexually functioning and reproductive. And of course, then we get the question is, well, hold on a minute, Zach, or hold on a minute, Debs, hold on a minute, Jules. How do you make this work? How do you keep this into a what about telomeres? What about aging? What about this? What about that? Well, okay, let's take an assumption here that you live to 125 years old before your telomeres shut down. So I don't know about you, and I don't actually know how old you are, but we don't have to say it on camera. Don't worry, you can find
42. I'm good.
40. You're 42. Okay, you're 42. Okay, so that's a good age, 42.
Well,
I remember
you.
that. I remember that one years ago. So that basically 42 is like, for instance, I like to see what you're like when you're 82, right? Now, if you're the same as you are now when you're 82, wouldn't you be happy about that?
Oh,
Right.
hell yeah.
Yeah. So everyone's talking about let's lengthen our telomeres. Let's do this. Let's do that.
Right.
In actual fact, your body is like, think of telomeres as like a leasehold or a right. You have the right to the land for 125 years, and your body's the building. Well, I don't know about you, but I've never known a building that needs no maintenance for 125 years.
Right.
So the idea being is let's look at before you start to age. Now, let's go back to those points of the endocrine system. The endocrine system is one of the fundamental systems of the body that creates functions and regulates metabolism, growth and development, sexual function and reproduction, heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature, and sleeping and waking cycles, as well as your appetite. So the last 5 that I mentioned are easily maintained by diet, exercise, being sensible, not drinking too much tequila on a Friday night, the usual. Growth and development, well, you're already fully grown. All right. Let's just accept who you are. You're a white guy of Polish descent. You're not going to suddenly become Ethiopian, and it's just not going to happen. Just accept it. That's just what you are. Okay. That's
very accepting of that.
Right. That's just how it is. Right. Just take that. But metabolism and sexual function and reproduction are not controlled by diet and exercise. Now, when do you think your metabolism slows down? At what age?
Oh, I remember this was a trick one that you had brought up in your presentation. It was late. It was like 80s, right?
Yeah, exactly. In your 80s.
I was astonished when I heard that. Yeah.
It's much later. And so because of that, the reason why your metabolism slows down is because your lifestyle changes. You hit 30, you're making some cash, you get lazy. You find a girlfriend, suddenly, instead of you going down the stairs, walking to work, you can afford to take a cab or an Uber or a driver. So you get lazy. You take the elevator because it goes straight into your condo that you've made money on and you bought, right? Rather than going up those stairs that you used to do, right? And again, let's go back to the blue zones, right? These people that live in Crete, in Icaria, in Sardinia, in Costa Rica, in Loma Linda, Okinawa, whatever. All of these people, what do? They live in hilly areas. They walk up the stairs. They farm their gardens. They do the things that we want for convenience. So that's where your metabolism slows down, because what happens is, and I hate to admit it, I just did a body DEXA scan the other day, and there's pretty much the same weight as I was and similar size to what I was when I was 20, 21, 21, 22. I can still wear the same. In fact, I can still wear the same pants. But I had been sick recently. I was very ill, and I was hospitalized for a little bit. I've recovered, but my muscles had gone away. So although we used to call it in the martial arts game, porno fit. You're fit enough for a porno, but you're not fit enough for the Olympics, right? I don't know whether we should cope that one. But
I have not heard of that one, but makes sense.
anyone who's done Olympic Taekwondo or something like that, or some kind of thing like judo, that they'll say that term. But it's like interesting that you look at it. And you'll see that you look fit, but you're not truly fit. So think of it in real terms. Your muscles go from fillet steak to ribeye. So it's the same size, but it's striated with fat, and fat has no metabolic basal rate. It's a storage of energy. It is not a consumer of energy. And so therefore, your metabolism, you're saying, wait a minute, I look the same. How come I cannot eat the same? Because it's all happening under the hood. Everything's happening under the hood. That's metabolism. So again, that is maintained by lifestyle and exercise and so on and so forth. But the last one that you cannot control fully with diet and exercise is sexual function and reproduction. You can mitigate it, but whether you like to admit it or not, as we age, whether it's for women or men, or testosterone and estrogen levels do decrease. You do lower it. There are ways to delay it, but at some point, usually around, well, it can only happen from as early as your late 30s, but usually it's in your mid 40s. After that point, you have to start ways of reigniting your system that does not require, that you can't just do by just doing certain types of squat lunges to increase the muscles in your thighs, and therefore release the serotonin and the estrogen and testosterone hormones through your pelvic girdle, right? It just only has certain limitations. And at that point, that's where you have to control that system and keep it spinning. So you're 40 years old, you're about to hit middle age, well, you're in middle age, but you're about to hit like significant middle age, which is where you are right now. And it's a very interesting point. So you're just at that point where you know who you are, you're happy with who you are, you're comfortable with who you are, you've got skills, you've got knowledge, you've got experience, you've had wins, you've had losses, great. You're much more at peace with who you are. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then just at that moment, you're like, holy shit, everything's falling apart. What the fuck,
man? Well, isn't that life, right? Right when you feel like you got to figure it out, it's like,
right.
No, you don't.
Right. So what we are doing is we're saying, why don't we give you an extra 20 years? So where you are right now, I'm not saying I can recommend you drinking bottles of tequila daily, but again, where you are right now, we can give you an extra 15 to 20 years of the vitality and the health that you have. And that is, wait a minute, if the body, now let's go back to the genetic side. When you look at the genetic side, there are some things in our gene makeup and which show that we age more quickly than we should do. There was a couple of bits in the genome, and without sort of stating my credentials, if you want, you can talk about those later. But in terms of like, there are some things that we shouldn't die when we die. We shouldn't fall apart when we fall apart, especially women. Women. So unlike men, it's the one time actually I believe that women are less complicated than men. It's the one time, which is that basically there is menopause. It's a very clear breakdown of after that point, women age far more quickly because the things that keep their bones dense so they can carry children, or their skin supple so that they don't get injured and get infections whilst they're carrying children, or keeps their frontal cortex lobes far more fluid so they can communicate better. Now, communication and comprehension are not the same thing. When you talk about communication, really we should talk about comprehension. Do you understand what I'm saying? Not can you hear what I'm saying?
Right.
It's a big difference. Big difference. But women are definitely more inclined to talk more. When you get a bunch of guys, they sit around, yeah, mate, yeah, sure, bang. But when it's women, they talk a lot more. Now, that is why they're generally, in the same way that men are stronger. I mean, even if you take a top-level athlete, so a prime example with running is Flojo ran 110.49, right? A good club runner, male club runner, will win that. Will smash that record, right? But he's never going to win the Olympics. In the same way, women are far better at interaction, language, communication, interaction than men are. We have to learn it a lot later because our frontal cortex is lower. So again, we're not equal, we're complementary. And that's what makes us strong, and it gives us our strength. So looking at those points, the things that make a woman, after menopause, they start to degrade at a more rapid rate. Now, again, if we can keep menopause from happening, it works. Now, we've had a number of patients come to us, or candidates come to us, and they say, well, I'm already 2 years menopausal, it makes no difference. And we're like, okay, give it another year and you'll start to see things happen. And of course it happens, right? So we found a way, working on the research of two very brilliant groups of people. One is Professor Al Handy at the University of Chicago, who worked with women on polycystic ovarian syndrome and premature ovarian failure. And he did a pilot study with 3 women. Woman number 4 is actually one of our candidates now. There was a good success rate using autologous stem cells. The other area is Dr. Sfakianotis and the Greek fertility community at large, whereby they have taken something called PRP, platelet-rich plasma. You probably know it more like it's a vampire facial now, but it's the same thing. It's a blood product, and you take the platelet-rich plasma and you inject that back into the ovaries. Now, both of them are very valid, but they both have limitations. And what we did is we combined the two, so the delivery mechanism of PRP with the stem cell extraction procedure, which with a little few tweaks, we made it a bit more efficient. And then we added our special sauce, which is platelet poor plasma into it. And we've added them together with no foreign material. So, in other words, we take your own body, we extract it from your own body, we process it down, we concentrate it, and then we re-inject that back into the specific parts of your body at the right quantities that you need to reignite your system. We don't have a very large sample size. We only have about 111 people that have gone through various stages of the procedure. We have just under 840 that have inquired and are in process, but through that. But we've had an 85% success rate of extending menstrual cycle or reversing menopause. As I said, we've had that. But again, it's a very small sample size. It's not enough people because one size doesn't fit all. This is the other thing that we've learned is a few sizes, say 4 or 5, fit 99.999% of the population. I haven't got a good soundbite for that one yet, but that's very interesting. And so that's what we discovered. And then from that, what we discovered was that as we were doing this, we started off with phase 1 of the whole Rejuvisite procedure. Well, at the time it was called exotherapy, but we had to change the name due to trademark issues. And also Rejuvisite means much better because it's rejuvenating a cell as opposed to exosome therapy, because it isn't exosome therapy. It's actually rejuvenating the cells. So that's why the name does what it says on the tin. So when we started off the first area, we discovered that we were giving people, like we were saying before, in the preamble, of the pill that you take, and the medicine is told you take a pill. So they'll come to us, we want to do a procedure, and we come along, and there we go. And we discovered that, hold on a minute, you're 250 pounds, borderline type 2 diabetic, you got to lose some weight and you got to stop drinking sodas and not eating ice cream. And then we can discuss next stages forward. And so what we did is we discovered that that was by far the best way to work it. And then with that, this is the thing that really kicked it, is we had one patient and she had incredible results from just a diet and exercise and supplements routine. And again, I was as guilty as everyone else about, the medicine way. I thought supplements was going to be the big one, but it wasn't. It was actually diet and exercise was the big one. Right. Supplements is very, very minimized. And in fact, we find that most people reduce their supplement intake with us significantly, which is not great for selling products afterwards. But hey, so what? We get the job done.
Healthy is sometimes not profitable, right?
Yeah,
to make you healthy.
Well, it is profitable for them, and therefore it has a knock-on effect, right? So then it's what we found was that this person had a massive reversal of her menstrual cycle came back after being 4 years menopausal before we even did the procedure. Well, how did this happen?
Hmm.
And we started to look at that, to discuss with her. We discovered that she had a very incredible way of mental strength. And then we realized that's where we realized it was about emotions, because she had found a way to mitigate her emotional responses to things that she perceived as stressful. And again, I'll give you an example. You and I are on the street and we see this person get run over, and you are devastated because this person saved your brother's life. And I look at them going, just desserts, because that person ran over my brother in an accident,
Hmm.
in a drunk
Yeah.
driving accident. Both of our emotions are valid.
Hmm.
There's no right or there's no wrong. They're both valid emotions. It's how you deal and interpret those emotions that will affect your body. If I hold hate for that person, it will eat me up inside. There's no
Hmm.
two ways about it. How we quantify that is very hard to do. And this is, again, where it becomes very difficult, because by quantifying it, if I say, oh, if you feel good and you manifest this and you believe that, I sound like a, new age snake oil salesman. Not going to work. What we want to say is, stay in our lane, back to endocrine system. We're looking at sexual function and reproduction. We know that by doing this, we can give you another 11 years of life or 15% more lifespan, and we can increase your sexual function and reproduction. With men, it's not quite as easy, but we can come to that at a bit of a later stage. But stick with women. And so we know that we can do that. So we stick in our lane. How do we quantify the effects emotions have on estrogen production, testosterone production, um, hormonal balance? Now, again, this is a very interesting point. When you have, when women go through menopause, or when men start to age, or andropause, we have hormone replacement therapy. So you take estrogen as a woman. Well,
Hmm.
estrogen is not produced as estrogen. It is actually produces testosterone that is then amarased into estrogen, E2 estrogen specifically. There's three types of estrogen, E1, E2, E3.
Hmm.
And then you have breakdowns of the different types of OH or methylated groups of estrogen. A little bit technical, but I'm just saying that there's something called the 4 OHs, the 16 OHs, and the 2 OH groups, right? Of which some are very good for you and some are bad for you. Think of cholesterol, good cholesterol, bad cholesterol. So when you're taking these pills, your body is thinking to yourself, with men, it's a prime example with men that take, when they roid up on their tren and whatever, right? Yeah, man, yeah. And then the next thing is they stop taking it and they develop breasts,
Right.
because the body says, oh, wait a minute, I haven't got enough testosterone. Oh, we better produce some estrogen so we can amarase that into testosterone. So we do it reverse ways. And so that's the body. So we're not thinking about the system. We're thinking about biological band-aiding and how do we
Hmm.
play all this whack-a-mole, instead of saying, why don't we just make sure the body knows, because it knows how to heal itself. Do you think about how to breathe every second? No. Do you think about, well, you just blink 3 times since we've just spoken, but do you think about that blinking? No,
No.
you do it naturally. So your body has a way of, within its limitations of 125 years and so on and so forth, it has a way of healing itself. We're just showing or helping that body heal itself. And
Right.
so again, that's until we discovered the Freudenspanne, that's what it's about. And again, we've created a formula, we've created a score out of 100, and we've broken it down into the different markers. So we have things like self-belief, stress,
Mm.
motivation, the genetic markers, hormones, melancholy, which is like sadness,
Yep.
cognitive, physical cognitive and mental cognitive, and physicality. And they break down into a 12.5% breakdown. And of course, we then have tests to go with it. So you have to have a minimum number of tests: blood work, interview, uh, Freudenspanne test. But then we recommend, if you can, genetic testing, gut biome testing, which is a big one that no one really talks about, bone density scan, which is pretty straightforward and very essential, and mental scan. And so we then break that down and we can have a figure. Now, obviously, technically, 100 is the maximum you can get, but no one ever gets 100, because if you have 100% self belief, you're basically a psycho. you, you, you can't be 100% self-belief. There's always got to be an element of doubt somewhere. The question is, where do you draw that line? So we look at a very old school way of marking it, like back in the day when we were kids doing our exams, you had 80% was an A grade, right? So kind of thing, right? So it's in that kind of area, 80%, 80 points. But of course, again, genetics, you and I will have different genetics. So being of Polish descent, of West Slav descent, right? I'm assuming you'll have certain markers that will make you say, if you've got some Viking in you, which probably you do, you'll probably find that you're far more immune to HIV contraction, for instance, right? Just some more points, right? So that will mean that you'll have maybe a more robust immune system. I'm just giving some very general terms here. I'm just saying. So therefore, those genetic markers will have a very big influence on what you're doing for maximizing that. Now, if you're Ashkenazi Jew, for instance, you have a much higher rate of getting Alzheimer's, inflammation, so on and so forth. Doesn't mean you're going to get it, but it just have to be aware of it. Right. And that's what Freudenspanne is about, is understanding your limitations and maximum, because you're only as strong as the weakest link in your chain.
Right.
You know? I mean, I remember the first day I went to like junior school. I turned up and I had everything. I was my uniform. I went to like one of those English boarding schools. And junior, I had all the sort of like suit and everything, my uniform. I turned up and everything was perfect. And then I sat down at my desk, and I still remember this to this day. You know, I was like, sat at my desk, and then I put my hand on, sir, I forgot my pencils. I'd forgotten my pencils for the first day. So what could I have done? You know, nothing I could do, right? Yeah. So that's basically what Freudenspanne is about. And again, it only happened after phase 1. So we're now in phase 2. As I said, we've got 2 clinics opening, or that one is open already, but the second one's opening very soon in Mexico, with the third one actually opening before the end of this year. So we have 3 full-blown FDA, Mexican FDA, but that's just as good, in fact, better probably, FDA regulated.
Are they just as corrupt or less corrupt? Which one is it?
No comment. No comment. They may be more honest about things. I think the problem.
I would imagine they would be. Yeah.
I think that for a start, in some ways in this area, particularly in stem cells, America is very behind the curve ball, very behind. Yeah. And it's this concept, and we're running this as a clinical trial. So we're running it as, even though it's not going to be recognized as such within the US community, we will present the data with all of our data points structured so that it is clearly shown to have the efficacy and the sort of diligence that's required. Now, what someone does with it, that's fine, but that's what we're doing for phase 2. And we're ramping it up to, we want to have 800 people go through this in phase 2. We want to look at, after the procedure happens for 9 months, we look at all of the data points and data sets, and we're looking at how to improve it. And so that's where we are. That was a very long explanation for Freudenspanne, but sorry about that.
Oh, no, it's a wonderful explanation and kind of guides me to the next points of this, Saul, because it's obviously a very holistic viewpoint. It's looking at emotions, which are huge. If you know about Germanic New Medicine, Dr. Hammer's work, how that works. Within cancer oncology, emotions are so interrelated. Of course, they're interrelated with the reproductive system and with fertility. Now, you also have things like your lifestyle that you're addressing, and then you're utilizing these things that we already have within us that are healers, such as stem cells, PRP, PPP. That is the holistic viewpoint that you're going about. But most people who are dealing with anything that is fertility related know IVF is the only way to go, right? That's our kind of, gold standard that everyone runs to, or the freezing of the eggs, IVF, all these things that we believe are the ways as we extend our lives to become more fertile. Can you talk? I'm not even going to ask about your opinions of IVF, but maybe the comparison of this approach that you have with Austin Biotec versus one of that is the in vitro fertilization.
Okay, so for a start, the most important thing is what we do is not IVF. So we're not about having children. What we're saying is the ability to procreate keeps you more vital and healthy. With caveats, you have to screen for cancers. There's certain things there are caveats with that, without getting into full details. But you have to screen for certain markers and so on and so forth. And some people we can't treat all people. But to IVF, can you repeat exactly what you were trying to say to me again? I want to just say about.
I would love for you to let the audience know about the difference. And again,
Right.
I don't know your opinions on
Right.
IVF, and I don't think we're here to just say it's awful, it's terrible, it's bad. I mean, maybe that's what you think of it, but more about that difference of someone saying, well, I was told to go down the IVF route. What is the benefit of going down this route that you
Right.
are a part of?
Okay. So, we have a candidate coming to us who's exactly in this situation. Without going into details, but she's still in fertility bearing age. Her husband is in great shape, everything, and they were recommended because she had turned 30 to go to IVF. She didn't need IVF,
Sure.
so she just didn't need it.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that technically speaking, after the age of 30, you do lose your fertility. But then saying that, there's always exceptions to the rule. My grandmother had her first child when she was 45, right? That was that's basically what she had, and she had it naturally. So be it. There are some people that are exceptions, but I think there are more exceptions than there are exceptions to the rule. All right. So in other words, the situation with IVF is, if in doubt, immediately let's go to drugs and medicine.
Yeah.
And I think that is a mistake. It's because it's a bit like what's it? There was a friend of mine who said he said you're 3 cuts away from clown face, right? When you're doing aesthetic surgery, because I've got a little problem with my eye, and I do this, and then I do a second one, and the third one, and like that, right? And so it's a bit of an exaggeration, but the minute you start down that road, there's a very hard way to come back. So fundamentally, the difference between what we are and what IVF is about, you have a need, a band-aid need, having children. We're going to max out your ovaries, produce these eggs, and then we're going to freeze them, and then we're going to artificially inseminate them, and we're going to do it this way. What we suggest is we're about keeping that functioning system working smoothly. And so so you could have rejuvenate procedure injected into your ovaries. And of course, when you say holistic, I want to correct you. Ours is very specific.
Okay.
So it's not about just IVing it into the blood and seeing where it goes. We actually attach it to specific follicular style or follicular organs, testes, ovaries, skin, as opposed to dendrical, which is nerves and so on and so forth, whereby we actually can make a difference in a very specific moment. As I said, we stay in our lane, sexual function and reproduction. We're not doing anything else. We're not trying to make you into a midget into an NBA player, right? We're not trying to do that, or a giant into a gymnast. It's not going to happen, right? It just doesn't happen. This is what you have to stay, right? Yeah. So in other words, we can keep your body running as smoothly as possible. Now, people have come to us who want to have children. And we are very clear. It is not about, we're not a fertility company. Yes. We are a longevity company, a wellness company, but there is a byproduct that can allow you to have children the natural way. And it's a lot more fun. Let's be frank, right? This do it the old school way, right? So that thing is great, but we are looking in phase 2 at ways that we can improve that part of it, which is the fertility part. So I'll give you an example. We take so when you produce estrogen in the body, it comes from 2 parts of the body: the ovaries and the surrounding tissue, the uterus, and the adrenal gland and the surrounding tissue. Approximately the split is 60-40 in favor of the ovaries over the adrenal glands. And of the 60%, about 40% comes from the ovaries, and the other 20% or 15% depends on, everyone's not exactly the same, but it's very general terms here, comes from the uterus. So, or the uterine lining. So when you have something called FSH, follicular stimulating hormone,
Mhm.
as you age, your FSH levels increase significantly because it's sitting around doing nothing because there's no follicles to stimulate in the ovaries. So what we do is we take your stem cells, we process them to the certain size, our special mix and special source, which again I'm not going to go into right now, but just again it works. And we then reapply that to the correct parts of the ovaries to stimulate the follicles. And when I say we have an 85% success rate, that is what we have an 85% success rate of stimulating the follicles. What that does is reduce follicular stimulating hormone FSH down because the hormone's now being applied to the increased follicles in the ovaries, and estrogen or testosterone, but then estrogen
Mhm.
is then produced, and suddenly there's much better feeling of well-being. There's more bodily fluids. There's less brain fog. There's better muscular control. There's higher libido, and they just look better. Bang, they feel better. That
Yeah.
stuff. So it's a win-win. That's what we're looking at now. The next stage to that. And this is the other thing as well is once we apply it, it's a 1 day procedure. It's an outpatient procedure. It does take 90 days to baseline it, and you have
Yes.
to be being checked on. But the actual procedure is about an hour in a clinic, and you're in and out. You arrive the day before and you leave the day afterwards. It's very simple. It's a lovely area, and you go down to Mexico. It's a great time, and everything's taken care of. It's wonderful. Or you can go to Europe too. But anyway, so then we have afterwards we monitor you for 9 months. But what we discovered was we thought it would only last 3 to 6 months. But the higher rated levels of hormones last up to 3 years.
Hmm.
So we're like, wait a minute. For 3 years, I'm getting the related levels of hormones, so I don't need to take HRT.
Mhm.
And by the way, HRT have to take 5 times as much, right?
Mhm.
And there's the other beauty about this is, unlike taking drugs to stimulate the ovaries, there is no long-term damage to the ovaries on the assumption that you don't have cancer markers, right? There are some assumptions again, right? We have to be very clear about that.
Right.
So wait a minute. After 3 years, I can then re-up again, a 1 day procedure, and I can last another 3 years. So let's think about this logically. What did we say at the beginning? 5 years longer you go through menopause, you live an extra 11 years. So let's just say we do 3 sets of 3 and it's 9 years. Let's keep it very simple and round it up to that. That's 20 years longer of living, 20 more years of life. So instead of you starting to start to become more decrepit or more aging at a rapid rate in your 50s, you're doing that in your late 70s or in your mid 70s. That's a big difference. And if we can improve this much in the last 4 years of scientific achievement, imagine what we can do in the next 20 years, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so that's so. But the beauty about this is on the assumption again of not having cancer markers, on
Mhm.
the assumption of having certain genetic things that you don't have. Again, I want to be very clear about that. We're not gods, we're scientists, okay?
Mhm.
But once you have that, you then can say, we can safely keep you youthful without having damage to the drugs, without having the clown face effect, right?
Mhm.
Bang, you're straight out, right? And that's massive because what you're doing is you don't have to take drugs regularly. Now, again, because IVF has a very specific need of having children, but the damage that can happen to taking lots of drugs is you can have excess weight gain, there's
Right.
hormonal issues, there's hair growth issues, the damage to your ovaries is that blows them out. And I'm not anti IVF. I just think that they're working with what they have. And as we know about liability, insurance, there's a lot of other areas. And again, this is not me criticizing, this is just
Mhm.
me observing, right? Um, so that's the difference between IVF. So what we're doing is we're a precursor to IVF. We can keep you as healthy as possible. And you might get lucky and get it done the old fashioned way. You
Right.
never know.
Right.
Again, that's a very big area. So in phase 2, what we're looking at now is one of the endpoints that we're looking at is egg quality production. But that is not what we're about. What we're about is, as I said, vitality and so on and so forth. So that's the difference. I don't know if that's explained it clearly
Oh,
enough.
that fully explains it. And,
Right.
I totally understand that so much of this is first and foremost based on that area of getting you as optimized as possible and increasing that longevity factor within you that allows you then to avoid. I see IVS as that last chance sort of thing, just like I see a lot of drugs or surgery should be your final, not your starting point.
Yes.
And one of the
Yes.
things I know, Zach, is that we've seen it at our center, and I've noticed it in other centers, is a lot of times, especially if someone's already in a condition where they have a chronic disease, if you go through a period of, actually healing from that disease and detoxifying the body, the outcome may be that you become suddenly more fertile. And we've seen this where people didn't think they could have children, had something like a Lyme disease or EBV, some infectious disease. There was a lot of toxicity involved. They were on tons of antibiotics, got them off, detoxify, eliminated all pathogens, became pregnant. Do you feel like that is a part of the maybe the treatment protocol, or is it something you'd look at even with some before they do that to eliminate another factor that I believe is a big cause of infertility is biological system doesn't want to procreate in a very dirty, toxic environment, kind of goes against it in some ways. So is that a factor you look at too?
120%.
Yeah, yeah. You
Absolutely.
got to, right?
Absolutely. And you brought up Lyme's disease, which I heard there. And I have quite a lot of knowledge with Lyme disease. We have one
Yeah.
patient who had Lyme disease for years, who's going through the procedure right now. I have a daughter that suffered from Lyme disease, who's
I remember you telling me.
now been cured of it, or
Mhm.
certainly mitigated. But one of the issues that came from that was, without going into full details, but in terms of how she was treated, and ironically, the same initial doctor was for both that patient of mine and the
Mm.
my daughter. And it was interesting. The first thing he was giving her antibiotics. Well, why are you giving her antibiotics? It's a virus. All you're doing is killing the gut biome. And this is a very important thing, because antibiotics don't just take out certain bacteria, they take out everything.
It's a nuke
And
bomb, right?
yeah,
It's a
it's a
nuke
nuke
bomb.
bomb.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's a great term. I like that one. I'm going to use that one. Nuke bomb. Thank you.
You have my permission, please.
Thank you. I like that one. Good, good. So the nuke bomb. But the thing is about it is that the gut's biome is, and again, very simplistically, 80-20%. So 20% of the gut biome in your guts is required for maintaining a very good, healthy structure.
Yeah.
But when you kill everything and you do it with PICC lines and everything's going, because you're worried about secondary infection. What do you mean secondary infection? You haven't even got the primary infection dealt with first. Again, I understand where this comes from. It's protocol, it's convention. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it's not a one size, it's not a nuke bomb. It has to be a little bit more a bit more technical than that, a
Yes.
little bit more, and that's the issue. So when you look at the things with Lyme's, for instance, a prime example is that with a lot of people, there's a lot of lifestyle. um and I've lived in the States twice in my life, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, and I've lived in other parts of the world, Southeast Asia, obviously Europe, South America. The most times I've been the most unhealthy, I hate to admit it, was in America, on the East Coast, and so more on the West Coast a bit better. But I'm also a bit more aware now, and
Yeah.
a lot of it is down to, as you say, toxins in the system.
Yes.
Drinking certain waters that have been purified with chlorines or whatever like that is not necessarily the best way to go forward. Having M&Ms that, who doesn't love some chocolate? But that blue dye on the M&M or the red one on the Skittles is banned in Europe. And
Yeah.
that stuff
Right.
fries you, man. It fries you at deep levels. And so once you have this chronic fry, you have to reset everything. And that concept of resetting is very hard to do, which is why we have the 90-day baselining. It's exactly for that reason, because it takes at least 90 days for the body to reset. Now, there are some people who are very, very, experienced, they're already doing the right diet, the right exercise, so we can fast track them to within a degree. We still have to monitor them and do the blood work and so on and so forth, but we can fast track it. But most people, if they're coming to us from a standing start, would you go and run a marathon tomorrow without doing any training? Right, exactly. So
You'd fail miserably, I
yeah,
think.
you wouldn't even get past a
You'd
couple of
blister
miles.
up after 1 mile and be
Exactly. So that the toxins is very important, and you're right, and that's why we do the gut biome. And
Mm,
again, these are things that we've learned from phase one. We didn't have this in phase one. We didn't have the gut biome. We didn't have the bone density scan. We didn't have a Freudenspanne, and we've discovered that this is a massive difference. And for instance, we jokingly say that, you know, I wish there was a pill that we could do that we could produce serotonin in because there's a certain gut biomes that produce serotonin in your gut.
right.
So, you know, so if food be the music, you know, food be the food of, you know, music be the food of love, play on, you know, kind of thing. And it's like it's very interesting because the imagine if you could take a pill and it would just be like a natural, you know, ecstasy tablet, and your serotonin is flying out, but without damaging your serotonin receptors, right? Which is what antidepressants do, SSRIs, right? They do that.
Mm-hmm.
This is the difference, is about the way that you mitigate toxins and the way that you maximize the health of the body in a more sustainable way, a more a more practical way. Now, yes, we can't sell you a drug for that, because once we've taught you how to do it, we've taught you how to do it. But you still have to maintain it, and that requires understanding and re-upping every 3 years. But, you know, as we say, that procedure, once we factored in that if you amortize it to a monthly cost, it's around about $300 a month. Well, $300 a month to keep your health and wellness. That's your gym membership and a couple of tablets that you bought on your supplements. Boom, done, easy.
Yeah.
It's not that expensive. We want to get it lower, but if we could, but we're working with what we've got.
And it really seems the value is there. And of course,
Yeah.
anyone that's been through IVF knows it's not a sure thing anyway. And you do have a lot of detrimental effects there. And of course, the emotional effects of going through it and having to pay all that, wondering, worrying, everything that goes along with it. Now, you mentioned that, you know, this idea of the therapy itself, the Rejuvicite, and going through the process is wonderful for a natural way of optimizing hormones. Have you seen any clients that have opted to go not the bioidentical hormone replacement therapy route, but tried working with you before that?
Yes.
You
Yes, we have.
Okay.
Yes, we have. Again, we have small sample sizes. So again, and this is where things like genetics come into play, because there are certain genetics that are predispositioned to being, we can work with more easily, right? So, but yes, we have. The issue is that most of the time people are coming to us as a last resort, right? And so we're now having to say, we're suddenly having to dig out, you know, years of I think there was one lady at the conference that was sitting there with us. She was asking some questions.
Oh, I remember.
No, not that one. There was another one.
Okay, not that one. We're like, oh, I remember her. The one that just kept
I
asking
never met her
questions about
before. I
herself.
never met her before. No, but that one was interesting because she's come to us at a more advanced age, and it's unfortunate that she didn't come to us 5 years earlier. We're probably going to have the success that she wants. It's looking that way, but it's been a lot more work.
Right.
A lot more work.
Right.
So ideally, I think people should look at us as, come to us as a first resort.
Absolutely.
And the other thing about that is, if you come to us as a first resort, it's going to be a lot cheaper.
Right.
A lot cheaper, because we can do things that we can help you at some point. And this is the thing, we're in the longevity game. So whether you come to us now or 5 years from now, we don't mind. We want to make sure we can be the best we can be for you. And to do that, if you come to us as a first resort, we can help you with ways like just doing a full analysis report from us for you know, a few $100 will give you a blueprint of how to live your life for the next 15 years. That's a good value for money, in my opinion.
Oh, it's a great value for money. And you're so right. You know, when you reposition things to the way they should be. I always say what we do here at the center, we're in the business of health optimization. We're trying to get you as healthy as possible. We're not so worried about even the diagnosis and managing your disease, because what is that? And if you're
Yeah.
in the business of longevity, then of course the outcome of going after longevity may be or should be fertility, improved well-being,
Yes.
all of that.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
when you shift the what your main goal is, everything else falls in line
Yeah.
behind it.
It's true.
And
It's
that's where
true.
you have that idea of fertility that comes in there. For people listening and wondering, because you said it's a 1 day in out procedure type of thing, can you go through precisely what someone would experience if they were to work with you?
Absolutely. So the first thing is that you would come to us. You'd have an initial consultation, and we do most, unless they're based in locations where one of our team members is based, which is L.A., San Francisco, one in London, one in Europe, London. We would have to, and we have one in Florida now as well. Unless they're based in those locations, we do everything by tele. The initial stuff is telemedicine
Mhm.
or sort of via video call. So we have an initial consultation, and that starts off when we give the sort of layouts of where we can and can't go. If they're happy with that, we then go to a full analysis where we record the calls, we do a full interview. There's a series of set questionnaires they have to fill out. They have to do a series of blood tests, and we then analyze that. And a lot of the information that we get is from speaking to people directly.
Yeah.
There's just so many things that are missed on paper that you can see, just small details. And we have within our team, we have three biologists, we have a doctor, we have a former dancer stroke physical fitness therapist. So we have the whole range. And most of them are all in their sort of more advanced stages, so they have experiences in the right demographic. So then once they have that and they have the analysis, if they decide to proceed with us, we then put them into the fertility fitness program.
Mhm.
And that's 90 days minimum. Now, depending on what you require, it could just be once a month, you speak to us, but we give you a series of diet and exercise routines. And we have like something like a diet, which I actually printed something up to show you. We have like a menu that we create like this. You can stick on your fridge with like some background information like that.
Mhm.
And what that does is it gives you ideas of we have either a plant heavy menu or meat heavy menu, depending on what's required.
Yeah.
And that will give you an idea. We don't say you have to eat this food because that takes away from your Freudenspanne. You're like, if you feel like you're a lab rat, it's not going to be as much fun. I mean, obviously, maybe someone's got a kink for that, but I doubt most people do, right? Yeah. So basically, we want to keep it as simple as possible with guidelines, because we're not giving you fish. We're teaching you we're showing you how to fish. It's a big difference.
Yes.
And so that's the 90 days. And what we then do is once you get going, we then have to take your exosomes from your blood, which actually takes quite a bit of time, because most spins take 30 seconds to 2 minutes, depending. The spins that we have to do with your blood on centrifuge spins, that is
Yes.
about 95 to 100 minutes.
Oh, wow.
It's
And that's
huge.
for the exosomes.
That's for the exosomes, because we have
Yeah.
to, not all exosomes are created equal, and we have to get the right amount, the right way, and the right sizes, and then we apply that. So that takes about 2 to 3 weeks to do. You have to process it, you have to test it for illnesses and diseases, and then we have to have it shipped directly to the clinic. So
Yes.
it's part of that. So that takes about 3 weeks in total. Not in, think of it like sending off your passport. It doesn't take long to stamp it, but you just keep getting it back.
Right.
And then what happens then is you then go, once that's all done, and what the beauty about that is, it's also about the process, about the quality of the service. So you know that you're getting yourself ready, you're preparing for this, and rather than you're preparing because you're going to a hospital and you're sitting in a gown and you wait for 5 days and you come in and out, you're at home, and you know that once you start the blood work, you have the countdowns coming, so you can take it nice and smoothly. And then the procedure itself, as I said, is about a 1 hour procedure. But you'd go to, depending on the locations where you go to, but you'd fly into the closest airport, and then you're driven to your hotel the night before. You check in, last minute paperwork. You speak to the surgeon, so you know what's going to happen the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And then the following morning, you arrive at 9 a.m. I'd say 9 a.m. It could be 8:30. It could be 9:15. But 9 a.m. You go in and you go straight into the procedure. We put you into the operating theatre. We extract your stem cell. We put you under anesthetic. Very, as I said, low injectable anesthetic. We then take out the stem cells.
Is that from hip bone marrow?
Exactly, right? From the hip bone marrow and mesenchymal stem cells. We don't do adipose tissue; it's not strong enough. Yeah. And we then centrifuge out the right size and the right type of stem cells that we do. It doesn't take long to do. We then mix it together with our other blood products that we have. There is no foreign material. There's no PEGs, no polyethylene glycol. There's none of that. It's all your own bodily material. Now, on the assumption that you don't have a genetic predisposition, again, this is why we do the testing.
Sure.
That you're basically just putting cleaned up best stem cells that you have, right, back into your body. And then we inject it into the ovaries, and then that's it. There's two surgical procedures that we have at the moment, depending on the clinic, although the clinics are going to have standardized eventually. One is the laparoscopic procedure, which is a tiny cut. Mm-hmm. The other one is transvaginal, which is no cuts, which is far less invasive, much better. But it's not better. It's more advanced in many ways, and that's the one we use. Also, ironically, is cheaper. Ironically, well, there's not as much anesthetic required, that way, and it's also quicker. So that's the one that we use. It goes in, you're out, and then you'll be awake after about an hour, and then you just have a glass of water, and then you do a checkout. You go back to your hotel, which is right next door, for the night. Just in case there's some reaction, just in case something's wrong, we're right on call. It's right there, and then the following morning you're free to leave. So technically, it's 2 nights, but it's a very simple outpatient procedure, and that's what we do. And then after that, you then have an assigned consultant for 9 months, and we monitor you for 9 months. So every 3 weeks, you do certain blood tests. After 4.5 months, you do a bone density scan. And then finally, you also do some other gut biome things as well, depending on who you are at the beginning, because a lot of these things are dependent on what you start off with. And at the end of 9 months, that's it. We don't monitor you after that. You do have access, though. We have something called Vent Box. So what we discovered is that every 5 minutes, people are calling us up wanting pieces of stuff. And we're like, it's not working. We have a team of 5 to 6 specialists. We just are overloaded. We just can't cope with that.
Yeah.
So what we said is, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to give you a vent box. You can call up a number which is personalized to you, and you can shout, you can scream down it, you can do whatever you want. And we're not.
We all need one.
Yeah, we all need one. We're not going to probably listen to it because we don't have time, but if we see anomalies in your blood work, which we've discovered with a few of our patients, and then we go, and we cross-reference to that date, we look at the vent, and we discover that this person's venting about their credit rating was screwed, and they tried to buy a car, and they couldn't get this, and they're like, there's a spike in cortisol, and this is quite interesting. So we not that I'm saying you should be venting all the time, but we have these poems. So there's a lot of little data points that we're collecting that we analyze that procedure afterwards. And so the other thing we have is that we're developing, now that we're getting a larger community, is something called it's called the Wise Women Corner, but we'll probably change it to the Wise People Corner for gender equality at some point in the future. But the point is that you can talk to other people who've gone through the procedure. Now, whether you're the person who's gone through it or the partner of the person who's gone through it, you're obviously on the inner circle, so it's not anyone. Not anyone can join it, but you can discuss things once you've been through it, and that's very interesting because it allows you to have a self-help group's not the right word, but a community base. Now, back to what we're saying with aging and longevity and long communities, it's about social interaction. It's about social structure. So that's what we do. So that's the overview of the procedure. So it's not that much in terms of being in a hospital, but there's a lot of monitoring afterwards, and there's a lot of preamble to that. And as you know, like we said with the marathon, you don't. It's not just it's not just the run itself. It's all the prep beforehand and the prep afterwards. The relaxation afterwards. So that's basically the procedure as is. Yeah.
Yeah, no, super simple if you're one day in and out. And it is true that you're going to, of course, have to do the work before and afterwards to do it. Now, there's another part to this. I understand that you're completely looking at the longevity of the individual you're working with. But if the goal is for that person to have a child with a partner, what role or what are you doing to work with the partner sometimes? Because of course it's two people, right, that are involved in this process. Women usually get the brunt of the blame, let's say, where a lot of times, as you mentioned, motility of sperm, 50% down, all these things,
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
men got to take some responsibility for this.
Absolutely.
How are you working with that, understanding that, of course, you're looking more on the woman's side of the
Right.
equation?
Right. Well, great point. First, for a start, we're looking more on the women's side to begin with, because, as I said, it's the one time they're less complicated than men, the one time.
Yes.
But
Yes.
it's a very valid point you bring about what we call joint decision making. So the first thing we do is we, if there is that situation, again, we're very clear it's about longevity. It's not about having children again. But what we do is we say in the initial interview or the initial consultation, if they have a partner, the partner is absolutely free to come on the screen, to come with us, to join in, to be able to speak. And also from our point of view, that gives us better data set points. We understand. Now, without, again, being specific, there are generalizations within certain cultures and communities whereby there are, as you say, women are always given the blame, right? And it's wrong, because it's actually not that true. There is a lot more to it than happens. And again, by them being pressurized by their partners, by their family, whomever, that can have a negative Freudenspanne, because you emotionally, your cortisol levels go up, cortisol makes you temporarily infertile, etc., etc., etc. So what we want to do is say, listen, dude, chill out. Take it easy. And the thing is that's where it's actually quite useful as a guy to be able to do that. That's great, because you can say that as a man. So we do look at that very much so. We work with a lady who's very, very interesting, Terry Cutie, who does the EPC Foundation. It's to do with breast cancer survivors. Remarkable woman, actually. Remarkable. I should introduce you to her. She's fantastic. And Dr. Minas Chrysopoulou, who does the actual breast reconstruction. And they developed something called joint decision-making processes, and understanding how you have that. And so we do have within our team, Dr. Manos Gallegos, who actually works in joint decision-making areas, exactly for this reason. So in a very long-winded way, again, sorry, a bit long-winded today, but in terms of like the answers, yes, we look at that very clearly, and we're not expecting them to be there all the time, but by them knowing that we're there, they tends to relax the situation. So therefore, has a knock-on effect of reducing that. And also, once or twice we've been asked for the men they've asked us to do some checks on them, their health. But one of the issues with that with the men's side of things is that there's a lot of areas with regard to fixing men. It's much harder. So it is actually harder. It's just very, very difficult. But yeah, so that's basically what we do. That's how we do it. So we do check into that. Yeah.
I think it's one of those kind of taboo things that men don't like to discuss, that there, could be a problem in this situation. But of course, it takes both sides. And, it's great that you're of course, looking at that joint decision-making process and relieving some of that pressure from the woman's side. Now you're expanding, you got new locations coming up. Where are the locations right now if people are interested and wondering where this happens?
Okay, great. So we have two locations in the North American continent, and I'm assuming that because you're based in New York, we're just going to talk about the North American continent. Okay,
That's it.
so we have Mexico City, Santa
Hmm.
Fe, Mexico City, and we have one in Tijuana or Tijuana. They're in the Freudenspanne way.
The American Freudenspanne way.
Tijuana. So we have those two locations, and they are both very very high quality locations. And ironically, at the conference that we met at, one of the people that was there, it turned out that this, who's now one of our patients, turns out that she worked with one of the clinics. Oh my God, you work with Priscilla? And I was like, yeah. I was like, okay, I'm coming straight away. I work with him already. I was like, okay.
Small world.
It's a small world, but that's actually great because what that does is it allows people to have, we're cutting edge. We are, again, we are, uh, because we're pioneers, and both of us are in this area. It's very easy to get chopped down at the knees before you get going. And
Absolutely.
so by keeping it as quality as possible, as diligent as possible, as professional as possible, is the best way we can prove that this has real long-term value for areas. So in your locations, they're the two, Mexico City and Tijuana. We do have others coming on board towards the end of the year, but worry about that. When you bring me on again, I'll talk about it then. How
Yeah,
about that?
no,
Yeah,
yeah. I know you're busy with two others, but those are
yeah,
the two
yeah,
right
yeah.
now. Where do you envision kind of the field of longevity and fertility going? Do you see things opening up in the U.S. anytime soon, or are you just concentrating on what you can do right now? Where do you think it's going?
Okay, great question. Really good question. Uh, it's very hard to overcome the inertia of a very large locomotive, and that's
Yeah.
what the US is. So rather than try and take it head on, we take it by the side.
Hmm.
The beauty about what we're doing is the preamble to the actual procedure is not stem cells. It is fertility fitness. It is hugs routines, which is exercise routines. It is the diet and exercise menus, and that is can be done. It's already done in the US. So in that sense, what we believe is where we see the future going is maximizing an understanding and a self-awareness of what you need to do to keep yourself fit. So in other words, like saying to you, we can give you a report that will give you the blueprint of what you need to do. And it's not going to cost you, $50,000 like an IVF or whatever it's going to be for whatever. It's just a few $100s. And that report will give you a blueprint of where to go. Obviously, we have our own procedures that we recommend, but you don't have to do them. And you know what? It's better just to do the diet and the exercise, and rather than just try and get everything done. So where we actually envisage it going forward in the US is the first thing is having the preamble and preparation awareness, improving that, maximizing that, getting that to as many people, which is why I'm starting to talk about it. It's not my natural, though I've been talking a lot on this one, not my natural inclination to talk about this. I just want to do it.
Sure.
The second thing is knowing what is good for you is half the battle. Okay, you still got to do it, but if you don't know what you're doing, you haven't got a hope, right? So it's basically about awareness, information. I don't like using the E word, education, but should we say the I word, informing people, right? Informing people of what they can and can't do within limits, and it's layered. For instance, the other area I think is very interesting is stem cell freezing. So we talk about using your own stem cells, but you do age. Now, without getting too in detail about it, those stem cells do age a little bit as you get older, although technically they're immortal, right? So there are some things that happen to it. So it would make sense, I would suggest, that banking a bunch of your stem cells at the age of 25, or I know people should have them when you're born, but you say it's 25, right? Or 35 even, is better than waiting until it's 55. There is no harm, and the cost for doing it is not significant. It's not. We've done it in a way that's very cost effective, not charging you $10,000. It's just a couple of thousand, and it's stored and it's safe in different locations in case one of the buildings goes down. You've got two sets, for the redundancy. That's where I believe it's all about. It's about preparing information and being able to have that correct information to act upon it in the best way. And that is by far the best way, because once you get enough people doing that in the US, it will allow you then to say, hey, to the insurance companies, we have the actuarial the data to show you we can do this. So can we now bring this on board? I do also, but the big issue with the US is the cost. The same procedure that we would do in the US would be 3 times as expensive for the and it's not because the doctors are being greedy, because they're not. They're just saying, these are my costs. This is my liability costs. These are my insurance issues. And liability and insurance is terrible. I mean, it's this. Yeah. And that's the big issue. And the only way you can overcome that inertia is having as many people doing it as possible. So rather than trying to structure, everyone goes to stem cells, let's look at the health and wellness aspect and get as many people doing it as possible. And we're working with as many different organizations. So we work with bone density scan company. We work with genetic marker test people. We're not going to do our own. I could do a genetic test, but it's going to be a lot of work. But we interpret them a certain way. Right. And that is the issue. And that's what and I think that the growing of the concept of Freudenspanne, I believe that is a very, very big way, because we're not machines. We're human. And our emotions is what look, even Arnie in Terminator, he grows emotions. Eventually we get some form of emotions, right?
Even the machines have emotions, right?
Yeah. Even in the end, they get emotions. It gets us in the end.
Even the AI cries sometimes.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm taking that one too. Even AI
you get
cries
that
sometimes.
One in Nuke Bomb for antibodies.
There you go. Even AI cries sometimes. I got it. So there you go. I mean, that's what I think, and that's what I believe. But that's where I think we need to go, and that's what it's about. And working with people such as yourself who understand this. I mean, I remember seeing you on that stage, and you stuck out to me because there was this sort of there was a knowing laugh when I was saying certain things. I was like, I wonder what this guy does.
I know it connected, and that's the thing. When you go to enough of you connect with certain messages, certain pieces of it, and of course, others are just kind of blank face looking at you like, what is this guy saying? But everything you're saying really connected with me, and I think that's a big part of it, as you said, is awareness. If you're not understanding that emotions are involved, your own choices you make every day, that your only option is not just IVF, that there are multiple options out there, everything changes. That awareness field is now expanded to, oh, I do have options. The fear starts to go away.
Yes.
So as a kind of final question here to many guests who may be out there in their 30s or 40s as a female, saying, well, I'm not quite ready. I would like to have a child soon. What are the actions I could take aside from freezing my eggs? You said freezing stem cells, of course, looking at emotions, Freudenspanne, like what other advice would you have for them?
Okay, that's a great one. So the reason I laugh is because we just got an inquiry yesterday. Well, no, what day is it? Thursday? We got an inquiry on Monday, and we responded yesterday. But it was about, I'm 35 years old. I'm not ready to have children. What do I do? Because technically your fertility goes off a cliff at 30. Again, that's a very big generalization.
Right.
I also think it was interesting because the inquiry came from a couple. And I think there was a bit of reading between the lines. I think that the husband's not ready,
right.
And he's freaking out, and he's not sure what to do.
That happens too. I
exactly.
mean, it's a common thing, right, Zach? People are putting it all. I do myself too, everyone does.
Right, exactly. The interesting thing is that what we would suggest is the following. The first thing you need to do if you're in your early 30s or mid 30s, even late 30s, is get a full analysis. And once you have that, you then have information to where to go next. You might think, okay, you might say, because you're right, it takes the fear away. It's like, that moment when you file your taxes. Oh, I've done it. Yeah, it's great.
Such a relief.
Yeah, it's
Only
a relief.
12 months before
Yeah.
this happens again.
Yeah, but actually, when you think about it, unless you're doing something really scammy or something, all you're really doing is just ordering information. And what's very interesting about filing your taxes, as we're around that time, is you think about it and you're like, oh, I did X, Y, and Z, and it's actually you suddenly realize, oh, I only did that amount of business, or I only did this, or I did more than I thought. It's actually very good.
You have to reflect.
Exactly. It's a milestone reflecting point. So our advice to people is get an analysis done, a full analysis, and that will give you a very solid ability to decide what to do next, because it might change what you do. You might say, you know what? I have to accept it, bite the bullet now. I've got a predisposition to POF or this or that, and whatever it is, I'm going to have the kid. I'm going to bite the bullet now. Or you're going to say, I can get away with this a little bit longer, or actually, the process itself of doing the analysis makes you feel, hey, I can do this. We can do this together, or whatever that is. And by the way, I would recommend that men do this too. But again, and I think the difference, as you rightly point out, with men, it's like, oh, you can show no weakness. I'm a guy. I'm
machismo.
Yeah, machismo. But women are more aligned to say, hey, I'm weak, and by acknowledging a weakness makes you strong.
Absolutely.
And your frailties. So that's what I'd do. I'd recommend getting a report and, contact us. We'll help you out.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, how do people contact you?
Okay, great. You can go to our website, is the best way. austinbiotech.com. We do have social media. We are not super big on social media at the moment. We just go to the website, schedule a consult, fill out a document, or at least look at the information on the website. And then from there, we can get back to you. We'll give you a free consultation, and you can decide where you want to proceed with that. That's what we would recommend.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And Zach, when can we expect your book on Freudenspanne?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you put me on the spot now. I was looking actually on my list is to have it done by the end of May, which is not going to happen.
That's coming up really quick.
So, yeah, we have. I would say the actual book will be written by summer, the full actual layout of the book. Okay. But the editing and the structuring of it is going to probably towards the end of this year. I think what we'll do is I'm not speaking at any more conferences until the fall, the autumn. And then I'll start to sort of promote the book coming out. But I think for us, it's very much a case of, what is Freudenspanne? It's a methodology for existing, for living life, and it's a lifestyle choice. So it's a choice, and we're applying it to one area. So let's say October.
All right. I'm going to hold you to it and have you back on here to talk about the book.
Okay, that's fine. I can do that. That gives me a goal. There you go. October it is. You're done.
I'm going to schedule you to give you a goal. Yeah, really make you stress out. You're going to lack Freudenspanne writing about Freudenspanne.
No, I won't. You see, that's the whole point, because my genetic predisposition is I enjoy the stress. It reduces my cortisol level. That's understanding yourself, to know what works for you.
That is data in use. That is Freudenspanne.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Well, this whole conversation was incredibly Freudenspanne and lovely. And I love what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. Looking forward to having you back on. And thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much, Casper. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
For everyone listening, be sure to visit Austin Biotech. That's Austin, AUSTIN, Biotech, BIOTEC.com for more information. And until next time, continue writing your own healing story.